I got a call to fix some flickering garage lights, never expecting it to kick off a story way beyond my usual work. She, a mysterious and elegant woman, said just a few words before asking me, "Adam, what else do you do besides fixing things?" The next day, I got a text, "Want to hang out this weekend?" An unexpected invite from a world I never thought I'd step into. But this wasn't just any date. There are secrets, differences, and challenges ahead, things I wasn't ready for, and things you won't believe are coming next. Hello, my name is Adam. At the age of 36, I reside in a quaint area just beyond the borders of Tacoma, Washington. Not precisely a metropolitan enthusiast, yet near enough to remain engaged. I am an electrician, not merely an individual with tools feigning expertise. I dedicated myself to studying, earned my certification, and secured a position with a small local electrical company. We may not be a household name, yet we consistently find ourselves engaged in meaningful projects. Each day, I typically handle 2 or 3 service calls, a steady rhythm that ensures the bills are settled, allows for some savings, and nurtures my aspiration of one day launching my own business. That morning unfolded just as any other. 2 jobs were on my agenda. The initial task involved a swift remedy within an office structure, addressing a malfunctioning wall outlet. Nothing extravagant. Subsequently, a call came through from dispatch. A woman residing on the outskirts of the city sought assistance to examine the lights in her garage. There's an inexplicable tendency for them to short out at the most unexpected moments. It wasn't an urgent matter, yet she desired it to be completed today. With the address in hand, I entered it into the GPS and set off on my journey. The location was slightly removed from the bustling thoroughfare, nestled in a serene neighborhood, featuring spacious residences with meticulously kept gardens. As I approached the property, I eased off the accelerator for just a moment. The contemporary 2-story residence stood proudly, its expansive driveway leading up to a stylish black gate that had been left ajar, welcoming me inside. Elegant, not the sort of venue I typically find myself summoned to. After securing my vehicle, I took hold of my toolbox and made my way up the driveway, heading toward the garage. As I neared the side entrance, the door swung open, revealing a woman who stood tall, likely in her late 20s or early 30s. Her long, dark hair was gathered into a loose ponytail, and she wore uncomplicated jeans paired with a fitted t-shirt. Yet it wasn't solely the way it was evident in the manner she held herself. Assured, graceful. She cast a fleeting glance my way before her gaze fell to her phone. "Are you here for the garage lights?" she inquired, her voice lacking any discernible emotion. "Indeed, it's Adam from Cascade Electric," I responded. "You mentioned that they've been flickering." She inclined her head and gestured toward the garage. "They rush out every time I open the door. Occasionally, they return. Other times, they simply vanish. It's quite frustrating." "Understood. I'll investigate." Her words were sparse thereafter. She turned and made her way back inside the house, passing through the door that linked to the garage. I placed my belongings aside and immersed myself in the task at hand. The matter was quite simple. The antiquated wiring of a motion sensor, carelessly installed. The last person to undertake this task clearly took shortcuts. I turned off the power, took out the old unit, tidied up the wiring, and set in place a new motion sensor with modern housing. The process spanned roughly 2 hours, more or less, including the necessary testing and everything involved. Throughout the entire duration, not a single word escaped her lips. Only silence, devoid of small talk or casual check-ins. After completing my task, I gathered my tools, restored the power, and checked the lights several more times. Flawless. I rapped gently on the interior door and paused, anticipation hanging in the air. Moments later, she emerged once more. This time, she was not preoccupied with her phone. She approached with purpose, her gaze fixed on the lights that flickered to life in response to her presence, and a subtle smile graced her lips. "At last," she remarked. "They function as intended." "Indeed," I responded, inclining my head in agreement. The problem stemmed from a wiring issue. I also took the precaution of replacing the sensor. She will be just fine now. With her arms crossed and her head tilted ever so slightly, she exuded an air of contemplation. You've got a presence. Confident and real. I expressed my gratitude sincerely. Then, she leaned against the door frame. So, Adam, do you enjoy anything outside of work? I found myself caught off guard yet again. Indeed, I've encountered my share of amiable customers in the past, yet none quite compare to her. Honestly, she stands apart. I mentioned that my time is largely consumed by work, leaving little room for socializing or nightlife. I prefer the tranquility of quiet evenings and the serenity of early mornings. She nodded thoughtfully, a hint of appreciation in her expression. That's refreshing, she remarked. I found it surprising that she, too, wasn't drawn to the bustling social scene. She didn't appear to be the type who spent her weekends indoors. Instead, she seemed like someone you'd envision in the front row of an upscale lounge or aboard a yacht. Yet, the way she expressed it didn't come off as a mere line. It felt genuine. People make assumptions based on appearances, she continued. It becomes wearisome. I nodded, a sense of uncertainty washing over me. Then she continued, I know this is random, but would you be open to getting coffee or something this weekend? I paused for a moment, caught off guard. Hang out? I inquired. She smiled warmly. Yes, just you and me. Somewhere nice, somewhere quiet. No need to decide immediately. I took a brief moment to consider, then replied, I'd like that. Her smile broadened slightly. Cool. I'll send you the details. Thanks again for the lights. And just like that, she turned and walked back into the house, leaving me standing there as if I had just emerged from another world. I got into my car, shut the door, and sat there for a moment. What just transpired? The remainder of that day seemed like a surreal dream I couldn't fully awaken from. I drove to my next appointment, repaired a faulty outlet at a man's workshop, maintained a smile through the customary small talk, and found myself glancing at my phone every 15 minutes, as if possessed. Yet, there was nothing. No text, no missed call. Only an echoing silence. I didn't even know her name. I had completed the entire task without a single inquiry, maintaining a level of professionalism throughout. Then, at the conclusion, she tossed out that remark like a bombshell. Would you be open to getting coffee or something this weekend? I replied affirmatively, just like that. As Friday approached, however, there was still no word. I began to wonder if she was merely being courteous or if it was some sort of challenge from someone of her status. There's a story to chuckle over with her friends later. Believe it or not, I asked my electrician out. I keep telling myself it's no big deal. People say all sorts of things, right? But then, just around noon on Friday, a message appeared on my phone from an unfamiliar number. Hey, it's Sophia from the lights. Are we still on for Saturday? I'll come by to get you at noon. Just drop a pin. My stomach did a little flip. I hadn't even noticed I was holding my breath until I let it out. So, Sophia, now I had a name and she remembered it. I didn't dwell on it. I sent her my location, a public parking lot outside a hardware store, just off the main road. Not my place, not too far, just straightforward. She responded with a thumbs up. The following morning, I awoke far too early. I experimented with 3 different shirts, each nearly identical. I polished my shoes and even shaved. Normally, I forego shaving on weekends, yet today felt different. I needed to be presentable, maintaining my essence while appearing tidier. By the time I arrived at the parking lot, the clock hadn't even struck 11:45. I perched on the curb, feigning interest in my phone as I discreetly observed each car that approached. At precisely 12:02, a distinctive roar pierced the air. I glanced up. She arrived in a sleek silver Porsche 911 Turbo, the top down, sunglasses shielding her eyes. Her hair flowed freely, dancing in the wind like a scene straight out of a film. I swear every person in that lot cast their gaze upon her and then shifted to me, standing there like a delivery guy anticipating a tip. She waved. Adam. I offered a small nod and opened the passenger door. That's me. She beamed. Hop in. The seats were sumptuous leather, the kind you only encounter in car commercials. Her scent was a blend of citrus and something luxurious that eluded my identification. As we merged onto the highway, I finally inquired, "So, where are we headed?" "There's a place I visit when I need to clear my mind," she remarked. "Do you enjoy it?" "I promise." We traveled for roughly 40 minutes, navigating through hills and forests, the roads becoming increasingly narrow. Finally, she veered onto a gravel path that wound its way into a wooded expanse. The sound of rushing water reached my ears before anything came into view. She parked the car, and we embarked on a brief trail, perhaps 5 minutes long, until a scene unfolded before us. A small waterfall cascaded into a serene pool, encircled by rocks and towering trees that stretched toward the heavens. It was a sight of beauty, tranquility, and strength. I glanced at her. Her expression was not one of sadness, but rather a serene calmness, a sense of being centered. "This place," she murmured, "evokes a sense of insignificance, yet in the most delightful manner." We settled onto one of the smooth stones, positioned just far enough from the mist. She removed her sandals and let her feet touch the water. I joined her. The chill was biting, yet invigorating. With her gaze fixed ahead, she remarked, "I understand your thoughts." "Do you really?" "Yes, you're curious about why a person like me would extend an invitation to someone like you in this setting." I remained silent. Primarily due to her accuracy, she maintained her gaze on the water. "My father operates a substantial logistics company. My mother oversees the HR department. Our home was fully paid off before I reached the age of 10. Cars, private schools, connections, everything." I remained silent as she continued. "Yet, throughout my upbringing, others perceived me merely as a label. The affluent girl, the flawless one. Boys were drawn to the notion of me. Girls either aspired to be me or resented me. I never truly felt acknowledged. Not until I encountered someone who was unaware of my last name." "You mean me?" I inquired, a hint of caution in my voice. She nodded. "You didn't inquire about my life. You didn't attempt to impress me. You simply fulfilled your role, expressed gratitude, and departed. That's a rarity. You were simply yourself." I found myself at a loss for words in that moment. So, I uttered the first thought that crossed my mind, wondering if perhaps you were teasing me in jest. She finally turned her gaze toward me. I understood that, yet I was being sincere. A silence enveloped us, not uncomfortable, but rather contemplative. Then, a faint smile graced her lips. "I'm not seeking anything intricate. I simply sought the company of someone who had no ulterior motives. Do you understand?" I made it clear. No strings attached. She acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you." We lingered there for perhaps an hour, exchanging words, sharing laughter, recounting trivial tales. It was the most at ease I had been in months. As the sun began its descent, she rose, brushing the gravel from her jeans. "It's time to leave."
"Yeah," she said.
"But I'm glad you came." The journey back was wrapped in a comfortable silence. No music filled the air, only the whisper of the wind and the rhythm of the road. She stopped the car precisely where she had picked me up. I reached for the door, paused for a moment, then turned to her. "Will I see you again?" She hesitated before responding, finally saying, "Perhaps if you give me a call." I stepped outside, shut the door behind me, and observed as she drove away into the horizon. The instant the car vanished from sight, a realization struck me. It hadn't been a date, not in the traditional sense. Yet it was undeniably more than a mere excursion. It marked the beginning of something significant. I just couldn't quite grasp what that something was. That night, I received a call. Unknown number again. My heart jumped for a moment, hoping it was her. But it wasn't. It was my supervisor. "Adam, I just got a weird voicemail from a client. Said you were over-friendly at a job near Westlake." The blood drained from my face. Westlake was Sophia's neighborhood. I explained everything calmly, truthfully. But in that moment, a cold truth settled in. Even something genuine, something real, can still be misunderstood in a world so eager to label what it doesn't understand. The days following that tense call were restless. I found myself replaying every interaction with Sophia, wondering if I'd said or done something wrong, if the invisible lines between worlds were too thick to cross. But then, Sophia reached out herself with a message that melted the frost. "Adam, can we meet? I want to explain everything." I arrived at her house that evening to find a different atmosphere, less guarded, more vulnerable. She invited me inside, without hesitation. "I've lived under a microscope all my life," she began, voice barely above a whisper. "Every move analyzed, every choice judged. Meeting you, it's the first time I've felt free to just be." Her eyes searched mine, reflecting a storm of emotions: hope, fear, longing. "I'm scared, Adam. Scared of losing this, the simplicity, the honesty, because the world I come from doesn't make room for it." We talked for hours, peeling back layers of pretense, exposing our raw truths. Her world was one of expectations and facades, mine, one of steady routines and quiet dreams. Yet somehow, in the spaces between, we found a place to breathe. The weight of our differences settled not as a burden but as a complex tapestry, weaving a new story neither of us expected to tell. And just as the night reached its deepest hour, Sophia looked away for a moment, then back at me with a whisper. "There's something about me you don't know. Something I've never told anyone." Her words hung in the air, thick with meaning. I wanted to ask, to plead for trust, but the moment was delicate. I simply nodded, signaling I was ready whenever she was. That was our unspoken pact. And so, beneath the quiet hum of the city lights, two very different lives began to intertwine in ways neither of us could have imagined, each step forward shadowed by secrets waiting to unfold. If you've ever found yourself drawn to someone from a completely different world, or faced the challenge of bridging two separate lives, share your story below. What would you do if you were in Adam's shoes? Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow their journey, because sometimes the greatest stories are the ones yet to be told. It has been 4 months since I first rapped on Sophia's garage door. I can still recall the moment vividly. The way she avoided my gaze as she opened the door. The sharp, clipped tone of her voice. The gesture she made toward the flickering lights, as if I were merely a name on a service invoice. For a few hours, that's all I was meant to be. Yet, amidst the tangled wires and faulty connections, something unexpected ignited. After that night at her house, our encounters became a regular occurrence. Though not daily, as we both had our own lives, routines, and work, we met often enough for it to begin to feel like a natural part of our lives. Sundays evolved into entire weekends spent together. Text messages transformed into phone conversations. What once were awkward silences gradually shifted into a sense of ease. There was no sudden shift, no grand declaration of love. It unfolded slowly, with a sincerity that felt genuine. That, I believe, is what rendered it so authentic. Yet, reality is complex, and I soon discovered that being with someone like Sophia involved navigating those complexities. It began with glances, the kind you receive when entering a restaurant, where patrons acknowledge her presence, not from television fame, but simply from her existence within that realm. They regard me as if I were the unwelcome waiter who accidentally took a seat at their table. Once, at a dinner party celebrating her friend's engagement, the atmosphere was thick with tailored suits and elegant cocktail dresses as conversations swirled around equity shares and launch valuations. I found myself standing there in my finest shirt, nursing a ginger ale since I was the designated driver, all the while attempting to mask my impatience as I silently counted down the minutes. Later that night, I confided in her about feeling out of place. She met my gaze and replied, "That's because you're different from them, and that's precisely why I wanted you to be around them so often." Yet, it did not simplify matters. It was not solely her universe that was undergoing transformation. So was mine. My supervisor observed that I seemed preoccupied. I began to decline additional calls, not out of laziness, but because I found myself valuing presence over mere activity. For a man who has consistently identified himself through his profession, this was an unfamiliar experience. Sophia observed. One evening, we found ourselves in my apartment, small and chaotic, exuding a warmth that only comes from being well-loved. She sat cross-legged on my couch, perusing one of my old high school yearbooks that I had forgotten I even possessed. "You create a wonderful life here," she said with sincerity. "It's not much," I replied, "but it's mine." She surveyed the scene, the tools piled by the door, the worn countertop, the solitary painting I had rescued from a thrift store, perpetually askew on its nail. "I like it," she said, and I took her at her word. That night, we lost ourselves in conversation, exploring our present and dreaming of our futures. Not in a whimsical, storybook fashion, but in a way that resonates with the realities of life. She confided in me about her contemplation of stepping away from her corporate role, expressing her fatigue with feigning interest in metrics that felt hollow to her. She envisioned embarking on a journey towards something smaller, more significant, perhaps even creative. In response, I shared my own aspirations of finally registering my own business, acquiring a van, establishing my brand, and moving beyond the confines of working for someone else to create something that truly belonged to me. And then she uttered a thought that caught me off guard. "What if we created something together?" I met her gaze. "You mean like us?" She nodded in affirmation. "Exactly, like us." That conversation took place 2 months ago. Since then, everything has transformed for the better. She has been instrumental in helping me establish a small brand, crafting a logo, designing a website, and even formulating a basic marketing strategy. I continue to tackle my jobs, ascend the ladders, and find paint splattered on my boots. Yet at this moment, it seems I am not merely mending what was broken. I am progressing. There is no haste in our steps. We continue to inhabit our separate spaces, savor our individual mornings, and cling to our own quirks, yet we consciously select one another, day after day. That deliberate choice holds greater significance than any title could convey. Last weekend, we returned to the waterfall. The same spot, the same rocks. Yet this time, we brought coffee and donuts. I wrapped my arm around her, and she rested her head on my shoulder. For a long while, we simply listened to the soothing sound of the water. She remarked, "I never thought I'd fall for the guy fixing my lights." I chuckled, realizing I never imagined the girl who owned that house would welcome me back. She smiled. "Well, you're more than just the electrician now." I remained silent, kissing her temple and pulling her a bit closer, for she was right. I was more than that. I was still Adam, still 36, still navigating the complexities of life. One job, one bill, one step at a time. Yet now, I had someone who truly saw me. Not for my abilities, but for my essence. Perhaps that's the true narrative at play. It's not merely the affluent girl encountering the blue-collar man. It's not about the luxury car, the idyllic picnic, or the fleeting kiss, but rather two souls from disparate worlds opting to forge something fresh together. No theatrics, no Afsafiel, just a bond. Authentic, chaotic, and flawed, yet real. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to support us. Don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts and stay tuned for more amazing real-life stories coming soon.